Nancy Pelosi. Today, her net worth is estimated at more than $250 million on a government salary. And here's the part that surprises a lot of people. Much of how that fortune was built was completely legal. And that's where the questions begin. And she's not the only one. So how does this keep happening? Because the deeper you look, the more one question keeps coming up. How is this allowed?
Today, I think it is absolutely vital we put a stop to this.
On this, Nancy Pelosi made $130 million, one report said, off of investments while in office, including stock trading. It's an 816% return, guy. She beat even Warren Buffett over the last decade and the S&P by about 550 points. What do you think?
She has the highest return of anybody practically in the history of Wall Street.
According to various financial estimates, Pelosi and her husband Paul Pelosi have accumulated an estimate of over $250 million. Paul Pelosi is a businessman and investor who has spent decades working in finance, real estate, and venture capital. So when it came to investing, Nancy did not do any of it. That would be illegal. But there was a loophole. Since Paul spent decades working in finance, she felt he would be a better fit to do the actual buying of stocks for the family. All she had to do was tell her husband which stocks to purchase, and like a good husband, he listened. The debate began attracting national attention when financial disclosures revealed a series of stock transactions that appeared remarkably well-timed. Some observers began asking questions, others began digging deeper, and before long, a growing number of government officials started paying attention to something most had never thought about before: the investment portfolios of members of Congress. What they discovered sparked a debate that continues today, a debate that goes far beyond Nancy Pelosi. But Pelosi isn't the only member of Congress whose investments have attracted attention. Far from it. In fact, lawmakers from both major political parties have faced scrutiny over stock trades, investment decisions, and potential conflicts of interest. Richard Burr. At the time, Burr was serving as a U.S. Senator and chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. As concerns about COVID-19 were beginning to spread, financial disclosures revealed that Burr had sold $110,000 worth of stock before the market experienced a historic downturn. The timing immediately raised questions. Critics wondered whether lawmakers had access to information that ordinary investors didn't. Burr denied any wrongdoing and stated that his investment decisions were based entirely on public information. Federal investigators later examined the trades. In 2021, the Department of Justice ended its investigation without filing charges against Burr. Kelly Loeffler. Loeffler had only recently joined the Senate when financial disclosures revealed a series of stock transactions made around the time lawmakers were receiving briefings on the emerging COVID-19 crisis. She sold an estimated amount of stocks between $1.2 to $3.1 million right before the stock market crashed during COVID in February. As the pandemic spread and markets began increasingly volatile, critics questioned whether members of Congress possess advantages unavailable to ordinary investors. The timing of the trades fueled public scrutiny. News outlets across the country began examining congressional disclosures, and the controversy quickly became national news. Loeffler strongly denied any wrongdoing. She stated that investment decisions were handled by outside financial advisors and that she had no involvement in the specific trades.
I do want to set the record straight. I've seen some of those stories and it's absolutely false and it could not be true. So if you actually look at the personal transaction reports that were filed, it notices at the bottom that I'm only informed of my transactions after they occur. I'm not involved in the decisions around buying and selling. There's a range of different decisions made every day with regard to my savings and 401k portfolios that I'm not involved in. When we acquired the New York Stock Exchange back when I was part of the company, we actually put the first set of rules in that prohibited discretionary trading. So no longer do my husband and I have the ability to do discretionary trades, and that's why it's outsourced to third-party investment managers.
Federal investigators later reviewed the matter and no charges were filed. But once again, the larger debate refused to go away because for many Americans, the issue was no longer about a single trade or a single politician. It was about trust. Whether lawmakers had violated any laws or not, public confidence in Congress was being tested. And with every new headline, the calls for reform grew louder. David Perdue. Before entering politics, Perdue spent decades in the business world, serving as a corporate executive and building substantial experience in finance and investing. But during his time in the Senate, financial disclosures revealed that Perdue had been one of the most active stock traders in in Congress. Thousands of transactions were reported over the course of his term. Perdue sold more than $1 billion worth of stock in the Atlanta-based company Cardlytics in January 2020. The sale drew attention because it occurred shortly after he received an email from the company's CEO discussing upcoming changes. The Department of Justice reviewed the matter and ultimately did not bring charges. On January 24, 2020, the same day senators received a private briefing on the coronavirus outbreak, Perdue purchased stock in DuPont, which produced personal protective equipment materials. The timing became a major focus of public criticism during the broader congressional trading controversy. Investigations were later closed without charges. The sheer volume attracted attention. Critics questioned whether lawmakers should be trading individual stocks so frequently while serving in public office. Some watchdog groups argued that the practice created the appearance of a conflict of interest, regardless of whether any laws had been broken. Perdue rejected those criticisms. He maintained that all required disclosures were made and that his investments complied with existing rules. No insider trading charges were filed against him. Yet his case highlighted a growing concern among reform advocates. The debate was no longer focused solely on a handful of controversial trades. It had expanded into a broader discussion about whether members of Congress should be trading individual stocks at all. Because if lawmakers are responsible for shaping policies that can influence entire industries, should they also be allowed to invest in those industries? That question was becoming increasingly difficult for Washington to ignore. And as more lawmakers came under scrutiny, the pressure for reform continued to grow. And as more disclosures became publicly available, a surprising trend emerged. People weren't just criticizing congressional trades anymore. Some investors started copying them.
There's a new investing app available called Autopilot, which allows you to follow the investments of hedge fund managers and politicians like Nancy Pelosi.
Congrats to you if you've been following Nancy's stock trades.
I bought into the Pelosi fund.
Yeah?
It's doing really well.
Websites appeared, social media accounts began tracking disclosures, entire communities formed around following the investment activity of elected officials. For many Americans, that raised an uncomfortable question. If congressional trades are worth copying, what exactly makes them so valuable? And that's where this story begins, because before we can understand the controversy, we need to understand the rules, how congressional stock trading works, what lawmakers are allowed to do, what they're prohibited from doing, and why so many Americans believe the system needs to change. At first glance, the idea of members of Congress owning stocks might not seem unusual. After all, millions of Americans invest. Retirement accounts, mutual funds, individual stocks, real estate. For many people, investing is simply part of building wealth, and members of Congress are no exception. In fact, lawmakers are legally allowed to own stocks and invest in publicly traded companies. They're also allowed to buy and sell those investments while serving in office. But that's where the controversy begins, because members of Congress aren't ordinary investors. Every year, lawmakers receive information the average American never sees. They attend classified briefings, meet with industry leaders, and discuss upcoming legislation, and often have a front row seat to major economic developments before they become national headlines. That doesn't mean they're allowed to trade on secret information. Far from it. In fact, doing so would be illegal, just like it would be for a corporate executive or anyone else. But critics argue that the line isn't always so clear, because even when information isn't technically classified, access itself can be valuable. Imagine knowing months in advance which industries Congress is debating, which regulations may change, which government contracts are being considered, or which sectors lawmakers are paying close attention to. Supporters of congressional trading argue that lawmakers are fully capable of separating their public duties from their personal finances, and they point out that members of Congress are required to disclose many of their trades. Critics aren't convinced. They argue that lawmakers should never be placed in a position where personal investments could potentially conflict with public responsibilities. And over time, that concern grew loud enough that Congress was forced to respond. In 2012, lawmakers passed a piece of legislation known as the Stock Act, short for the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act. The law was designed to address growing public concerns about congressional investing. It clarified that members of Congress are subject to insider trading laws, and it required lawmakers to publicly disclose certain stock transactions. The goal was simple: transparency. If members of Congress were going to trade stocks, the public would at least be able to see those trades. But instead of ending the debate, the Stock Act may have unintentionally fueled it, because once disclosures became easier to access, people started paying attention.
There is no reason on planet Earth. Sean Duffy, now our Transportation Secretary, tried to convince me otherwise. I am backtracking. There is no reason on planet Earth that these people need to own individual securities, including futures and options and trade them.
As public scrutiny intensified, the debate surrounding congressional stock trading began to shift. The question was no longer whether lawmakers were allowed to trade stocks. Everyone already knew the answer. The question became whether they should be allowed to. For the first time in years, politicians from both parties found themselves agreeing on something, at least in principle.
I think anybody's doing anything wrong. If they are prosecuted and they go to jail. But because of the confidence it instills in the American people, don't worry about this. But I have no concern about the obvious investments that have been made over time. I'm not into it. My husband is.
Poll after poll showed Americans growing more skeptical of Washington. Many believed the political system favored insiders. Others questioned whether lawmakers could remain completely impartial while holding investments that might be affected by legislation. Supporters of a stock trading ban argue that the solution was obvious. Remove the temptation entirely. Require members of Congress to place assets into blind trusts or limit investments to diversified funds. That way, lawmakers could focus on governing without concerns about personal financial interests. The debate continued, and proposal after proposal was introduced. Some gained traction, others quietly disappeared. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Public pressure wasn't going away.
That absolutely stuns them. They can't believe that it's legal already. They can't believe we can currently do it. Most members of the public think it's already banned. And when I say actually it's 100% legal, they say why? And there's no good answer to that question. We should be here to focus on the public's business, not private gain. We shouldn't be here day trading. We shouldn't be here focusing on our stock portfolios. We should be here doing what the American people sent us to do. And that's what this bill is about.
As criticism mounted, journalists began asking more direct questions. Should members of Congress be allowed to trade stocks? Should their spouses? Would lawmakers support new restrictions? The answers varied. Some embraced reform and others resisted it, and many found themselves caught between public opinion and personal interest. Meanwhile, outside Washington, millions of Americans continued watching, wondering, questioning, and waiting to see whether anything would actually change. Because after years of headlines, investigations, disclosures, and controversy, the fundamental question remain unanswered. Can lawmakers effectively regulate industries while simultaneously investing in them? Or does the system need a complete overhaul? And as the debate grew louder, the people at the center of it found themselves under more scrutiny than ever before, including Nancy Pelosi. Because while the calls for reform were growing, so were the questions surrounding the trades that helped make her the face of the controversy.